dynamic. Last few weeks, there have been a lot of changes as we've been going through. We've been very excited to see vaccine beginning to roll into our acute care hospitals with the Pfizer vaccine, which is what we were expecting to use in long-term care. And we are expecting today that the very first Moderna vaccines will also be coming available in the state. So very exciting, but also a very challenging time as we're, I think, not only flying the airplane, but designing parts of it, learning how to staff it, and responding to some of the changes that obviously have come from the federal government in terms of some of the allocation issues and things along those lines. So very excited to be able to present this to you and happy to answer your questions. And if Ashley, you want to go ahead with the next slide, that'd be great.
Yeah. David, I just wanted to provide a brief introduction to everyone.
Sure.
On the ECHO model. So I do want to thank everyone. Good morning and welcome. We appreciate you joining us. This is now our fourth and final session for 2020 of the COVID-19 Vaccination Essentials Series that's brought to you by Rutgers Robert Wood Johnson Medical School, the New Jersey Department of Health, and the Nicholson Foundation. And we know you need this important information. And really, we appreciate Dr. Ed Narrow being here and representing the Department of Health and answering your pressing questions and concerns. My name is Mary Bridgman, and I'm a clinical professor at the School of Pharmacy at Rutgers and a clinical pharmacist at Robert Wood Johnson University Hospital. And I'll moderate and facilitate some of the questions we received from those of you who had pre-registered for attending today's session. As Dr. Ed Narrow indicated, really our purpose here today is to provide an overview of the long-term care pharmacy partnerships. We do appreciate all those questions that were submitted upon registration. And just as a reminder, you can submit questions using the Q&A feature in Zoom during our presentation. We're sensitive to the urgency of your requests, and we're going to make an attempt to answer as many of these questions as possible. This session is also being recorded, and you should be able to access that recording 24 to 48 hours after the conclusion of our session today on the Rutgers Project ECHO COVID-19 website. The website also includes links and resources that are shared today, as long as in addition to the recording for today's session. And just as a reminder, as the timeliness of this content changes with each passing day, if you're viewing the recording at a later time, realize that it may not be reflective of the most current information at the time you are viewing it. I wanted to just point out as we start websites for the New Jersey Department of Health, the CDC, and COVID-19 and .nj.gov as resources for healthcare providers that are also available, again, to answer some of your questions. So with that, Dr. Ed Narrow, I wanted to turn it over to you for your formal presentation.
All right, thank you. It'd be great if you can go to the next slide. So this one really just points out what our intentions were when we started developing this program back in, honestly, August of this year, when we formed up the vaccine task force and had our first meeting. And it's incredibly important that we've been very focused on making sure that the access is equitable. And that includes those who either live in New Jersey, work in New Jersey, or are educated in New Jersey. So we wanted to try to eliminate some of the questions of, particularly for workers. I live in another state, but I work and provide, let's say right now, services to, as a healthcare worker in New Jersey, am I eligible for the vaccine? Obviously, our goal is to achieve community protection as much as possible. Our goal has been that 70% of eligible New Jerseyans, which are currently adults, be vaccinated in our campaign. And obviously, a lot of that is dependent upon the availability of the vaccine. We're very excited that that there are now 2 vaccines that have gotten an emergency use authorization, and that one of them, the Pfizer vaccine, we have dedicated a large portion of that allocation to be going to long-term care facilities, both for the residents and the staff for those facilities also. And the other part is, as much as we can control, and obviously the federal government has been doing a lot through ACIP and the CDC and the Food and Drug Administration, but we really want to build on the trust that comes with our vaccines in the state, and to continue the process of encouraging people that vaccines are an effective and safe alternative to dealing with a number of different illnesses. If you don't mind going to the next slide. For those of you who really want to get into the details of what our plan has been, we submitted an interim vaccination plan back in the fall to the CDC, and that has been continually updated. When these slides are made available, you'll be able to have the link. It's posted publicly on our website. For those of you who do not want to read all 120 something pages, there is a shorter 4 or 5 page executive summary and also some frequently asked questions that we have available. The information that is on our website is changing regularly, and we are adding considerable more information as more information becomes available to us. This is a timeline. It's amazing that just 2 weeks ago, this slide was really cutting edge and none of the things that were on this had happened. But this certainly has walked us through everything that has gone on from VRPAC, which is one of the federal advisory committees, making a recommendation that resulted in an emergency use authorization being issued by the Food and Drug Administration. The fact that after that, the predisposition supplies of vaccine began to go out for us to selected hospitals when it was first Pfizer and now with Moderna. And then the fact that still very, very detailed, ACIP was able to review and make recommendations, some of them a little bit different than what we had been expecting, that we adapted to, which brings us to the point that this week we will have 2 different vaccines available, and that next week we will be entering or beginning the federal partnership that for us is Walgreens and CVS in vaccinating in our long-term care facilities. If you don't mind going to the next slide. The 2 different vaccines, I think everybody's heard by now, are Pfizer and Moderna. Essentially, both of them are mRNA vaccines, which is a novel vaccine. It's a new, these are the first 2 that have been approved for use. These 2, again, under emergency use authorization. They are slightly different in some of the indications. The Pfizer, because it did include people that were 16 to 18 years old in their studies, does have an indication for use on people above 16. And for Moderna, the EUA was granted for those over the age of 18 and does not include 16-year-olds, 16 or 17-year-olds. Other than that, they both have very similar recommendations, similar precautions, similar information about the conversations that women who are pregnant should have with their healthcare providers, and both of them in context seem to have be highly effective regardless of age, and particularly people that are over 65 or 75 years old. Both of these vaccines were found in their initial studies to be effective. If you don't mind going to the next slide. So this is, interestingly enough, this is an example of how things are going to be a little bit different. This slide was highly accurate until yesterday. There is no change in 1A. 1A are healthcare workers, both paid and unpaid. We define, and that the federal government has defined healthcare worker fairly broadly. And then the residents of long-term care facilities, which is part of the conversation we're having now. The changes in 1B and 1C, ACIP yesterday recommended that 1B contained frontline essential workers. So in essence, those that are having more contact specifically with the public, and move those over 75 years or older into phase 1B, regardless of what setting they're in. And then phase 1C will contain those who are 65 to 74, all other adults with high risk medical conditions, and the remainder of the essential workers who are not frontline workers. So we are still processing that. The Department of Health and the Commissioner of Health has a professional advisory committee that has been working very hard on all of our prioritization issues. And obviously they meet 2 nights a week, including tonight. So I'm sure they will be discussing this recent change in phase 1B and phase 1C. But essentially phase 1A, the one we're in now, has not changed. Remaining healthcare workers, paid and unpaid, and also long-term care residents. If you don't mind going to the next slide. This is a little bit of a busy slide, but I think it shows that we take a fairly broad view of who a healthcare worker is. Essentially, anybody who comes in regular contact with patients and/or specimens from patients. We have to remember our laboratory personnel are really included in this. And as you can see, the list is very long. I think most people understand the fact that physicians and nurses and pharmacists and dentists, those who are providing direct care to patients would be included, but also for us, the people who are providing security, food services, environmental services would also. These are not considered an exhaustive list, but really, I think the way we're approaching this is that anybody who's in regular contact with patients and are part of the care that's going to be provided to them in some way, shape, or form should be included in the in 1A. Next slide. Again, as we're moving forward, last week, the only people that had the vaccine were hospitals that could handle the ultra cold chain vaccine. So we had about, I think, 54 hospitals of our roughly 75, 73 hospitals were included in that. They were, so to a certain extent, a closed pod, vaccinating their own healthcare workers, getting some experience with handling the vaccine, and particularly the ultra cold chain. This week, we will see over 100 different open points of dispensing, which is what a pod stands for, that are coming. That will include some retail pharmacies, FQHCs, more hospitals that wanted to not have the ultra cold chain vaccine and have the Moderna, which was the regular cold chain vaccine, and a number of other people. We are going to be having processes so that healthcare workers, if it's not going to be given at their own facility, so if you're not somebody who works in long-term care or doesn't work in a hospital setting, we'll have a lot of information coming out over the next several days to help you locate a facility where you can get a vaccine. I think the important thing to understand is we estimate that there's about 650,000 people who meet the definition of a healthcare worker in New Jersey. And it's going to be a while before we receive 650,000 vaccines that will be available for healthcare workers in terms of the first dose. The other thing to keep in mind is that when you hear about the amount of vaccine that's being distributed to us, it's important to keep in mind that we are allocating into essentially a reserve pot. That is what Walgreens and CVS will draw in order to start next week vaccinating in the long-term care facilities. There are certain minimum requirements of what must be in that pot ahead of time in order to start. We've been told that we have to have 50% of the vaccine that they expect to use for that initial part A of long-term care. So for those roughly the first 650 facilities, we have allocated fully last week and this week that amount that is needed. I think it's roughly about 100. I think it's in total going to be about 110,000 doses we were told to put aside. So we will have about 55,000 doses already reserved going into next week to start the process for Part A. And obviously, whatever doses are needed, if more people are found to need it, if Walgreens and CVS communicate what the need is when we start Part B, which is approximately 1,100 facilities that are a little bit different than, let's say, skilled nursing facilities, which are the initial ones. We will make sure that those doses are available for the vaccine. One of the other important things to understand is we have to set aside only one type of vaccine. We chose to do the Pfizer because it made sense in terms of the ultra cold chain, that this is something that CVS and Walgreens can handle. They don't allow us to mix giving Walgreens one and CVS the other, which is part of the reason that we're starting when we are, is to make sure that we have the availability. And again, as we make our allocation decisions, particularly related to the Pfizer product, the first ones that we'll be making sure are allocated is whatever we need for the long-term care partnership. If you don't mind going to the next slide. And again, this slide I think is a little bit more for if people want to think about, do I see patients? So in other words, do I work in a healthcare facility? Certainly this provides some context to who would be included in that. Again, some of the things that we're setting up will be both a website and sometime in the next few weeks, a actual call center. I expect it to have like a toll-free number where you can call and find out if you qualify based upon your information and get information on where you can get your vaccine. I think it's important that we're not going to ask people to give 4 different pieces of identification in order to prove that they're a healthcare worker, particularly as we get into critical other essential workers, people with comorbidities. To a large extent, people are going to have to understand that we're going to expect them to follow the rules, but we really are not trying to make this so difficult that people are intimidated to prove that they fit in the category they fit into. If you don't mind moving to the next slide. So again, I think I've covered parts of this. As I said, CVS and Walgreens have been already scheduling and coordinating these on-site clinics that will be at long-term care facilities to vaccinate the residents and staff of these facilities. It's my understanding that once they start their cadence, their goal is to go back into each facility 3 times, I believe, over the space of about 6 to 8 weeks. And essentially to do the first vaccine, the second vaccine, and then a catch up of anybody they've missed. We certainly recognize that in the long run, there will be staff and residents who will come in after that point in time. And obviously, we are beginning to talk about what the processes would be as more vaccine becomes available to make sure that those that were not present or did not elect to get the vaccine in the very beginning have the vaccine available, a COVID vaccine moving forward. So I think this is just the beginning of, I think this is a hugely important beginning, and obviously will vaccinate a large number of people, but we certainly recognize that long-term care facilities, the residents and the workers will have some ongoing needs that we're going to have to plan for, and we'll have more information available on that as we figure out what that is going to be. You don't mind going to the next slide. Again, I think this shows how far we've come along. And the important part is that we are expecting next week, CVS and Walgreens. We've done all the authorizations. We've set aside the vaccine. I think long-term care facilities have done a great job of signing up. I'm getting a lot of feedback that they've been getting information from these 2 large chain pharmacies, national pharmacies, and have been signing up. And obviously, we stand ready to support that process. But we're very excited to have a couple of very large and experienced partners who are going to be doing a lot of that logistics and actually getting in and doing the vaccinating themselves. If you don't mind going to the next slide. So you will hear there's 2 different parts technically to the federal pharmacy partnership. The first part is what we're talking about, which we activated, which is for the vaccination in the long-term care facilities. The second part is pretty much every large national chain pharmacy is signed up to receive vaccines starting in phase 2. We were told that these would be separate allocations from our state allocations. That turned out not to be true, at least for the part A. For the first part, which is we were told, probably just before vaccines started coming, that we would have to allocate this from our allocation. That was fine. We made sure that happened. Again, for that second part in phase 2, where everybody else begins to come online and have availability, it will probably be similar that we'll be the allocator to those. And there are several of those stores that are listed that will be starting up open pods in the next few weeks. One of the ones I'm very excited about is Rite Aid has agreed basically to do a very similar process to what Walgreens and CVS is doing for long-term care. They've agreed to do that for people who work in home health care. So some of the large organizations are going to work with Rite Aid to set up clinics at certain places. So the home health aides, those are taking care of my father at home. Right now, as we speak, we'll also be able to get a vaccination. So we're really excited that Rite Aid had agreed to do that and is going to partner with us. Again, I would love to vaccinate everybody who's a healthcare provider and everybody in New Jersey right now, but we know that we are only going to be getting so much vaccine, and it's going to take us a while to get to everybody else. But again, very excited about these different pieces that that retail pharmacies are doing. If you don't mind going to the next slide. So I think this, my boss, the commissioner, started months ago with basically an educational campaign that started with awareness, has then moved into education, and is now moving into the operational side of how talking to people and what they can do for us. This slide's a little bit outdated. I believe she has probably done over 70 online presentations to, I think we're close to 3,500 people who are stakeholders. This included people in federal, state, and local government, other healthcare providers, professional associations, community and faith-based organizations, employers, unions, consumer groups, and she continues to do these. Over the next week or so, we do have a multi-pronged public awareness campaign. It's going to be multimedia. It's going to be in multiple languages that are going to be talking about not just COVID, but vaccines, engaging people and trying to make sure that they get the information they need to make their decision about getting a vaccine. We are putting information out on our website on a regular basis, particularly as the CDC or the FDA gets information that comes out. We've had a weekly newsletter that's called Vax Matters that is available on our website. We did the second one on Friday. Third one will be coming out this week. And you can also, when you go onto the website, you can sign up by email to receive it when it's released, so you don't have to remember to go back. We've done a number of listening sessions, and we've done enough. So it's a lot of information out there. There's going to be a lot more information coming. And really, we want to be as transparent with what we have. Really, if it is something that is if something that is known, has been published, and we made a decision on, we're trying to get the information out as best as possible. Things that are dynamic and likely to change over the next day or so, allocations to this institution versus another institution, those type of things we're generally not going to make public, but we really have the goal of getting as much information out. All of this will also combine to funnel people both towards our website and eventually an app that will help people find a place to get a vaccine and to find out where they qualify and which phase they go into, and also a call center that will have operators who will be able to answer those questions and help people who may or may not be interested in using technology do similar things. So a lot of this will continue to ramp up over the next several weeks, but this is really, I think, the comprehensive package to try to get as much information out to the public as possible. If you don't mind moving forward. This is the newsletter I was referring to, Vax Matters. Again, has a lot of great information. You see some of the information on some of the slides I presented on one of the pages of this. It's really designed to be accessible to everybody, and it is on our website. And I encourage people to sign up to get email notifications when the next one comes out. Don't mind moving forward. And again, we've also been trying to put these on our website. When you receive these slides, they have hyperlinks, so you can get a variety of information. Particularly, these are obviously more towards healthcare providers and other organizations. So a lot of good information that may be useful to you. And then a couple of things. I think anytime I've done a presentation, we all consider you deputized as part of our vaccine process. So people ask, what can I do? And these are the things we're asking from you all. Seek out knowledge and be informed, number one. Reach out to us if you have any questions. Participate in setting up the vaccination sites if you're able to. Help us build public confidence. If you're not sure about the vaccine, help us build confidence that the process that we're going to use to deliver the vaccine is going to be, efficient. It's going to be safe. It's going to be fair, and it's going to be equitable. Engage in the community as vaccine ambassadors. We're not using the word ambassador anymore. We're going to use health advocates. Obviously, regardless of whether you get a vaccine or don't get a vaccine, you need to stay safe. You need to stay healthy. You need to continue to social distance. You need to continue to wear a mask. And finally, the last slide, we are obviously encouraging you all, when it is your time and the vaccine is available to you, to be vaccinated. I have not had a vaccine yet. As a physician, I am qualified. I'm waiting to be told when I can go and where I can go to get a vaccine. We've been very happy over the last few days to watch a lot of my colleagues in emergency medicine getting their vaccines. I'm going to be very excited to see the first pictures of residents of long-term care facilities and staff this week or next week getting the vaccine also. So very excited. I love everybody getting a selfie when they're getting vaccinated. So I hope I see a lot from your institutions and organizations over the next few weeks also. That concludes this formal part of the presentation. And now we'll have the fun part where I'm sure you're going to have a ton of questions, which I will do my best to answer, or at least promise that we will get an answer. The one thing I will say ahead of time is that just please understand, while I'm going to try to be as specific as possible, things change. We had a number of things change just in the last 48 hours, as I pointed out, about who's eligible for the vaccine. I think some big obvious things are, the long-term care partnership is not going to change. Those things are locked in. It's going to, states are starting and we're going to be starting ours. But I think everything you should take in the context of a very dynamic situation that is, moving forward rapidly.
Thank you so much, Dr. Adenaro. I would agree, in the time of COVID, I think a day is like a year in many instances, and we realize firsthand how quickly the situation is changing. Thank you for those remarks. And I think we're going to also invite Ms. Jennifer Fearon, a policy advisor with the New Jersey Department of Health, to also join for the question and answer period of the presentation for today. We will try to get to as many of your questions as have been submitted. And I think we can probably start off with addressing some of the questions related to eligibility. So one of the questions was, when will community-based providers be able to get vaccinated? When will the website be up for registration? And do we know what that address is just yet?
So health workers in the community can start being vaccinated now. Obviously, I think as the Moderna vaccine, which is the one we're mainly going to be using in the open pods, is expected to arrive today, tomorrow, and Wednesday. So probably the second half of this week and next week is going to be when most of them are going to be moving forward. We are definitely going to be getting some information out in the next 24 hours related to the website and publishing information on our own website also. A lot of that is going to be some of the discussions we're going to be having after this meeting's over. So we'll be moving that forward. Jen, do you want to add anything?
I think we had Jen elevate to a panelist and then we lost her, but as soon as we can get Jen back on, we would love to have her remarks also. Do we know a little bit when the immunization registry will be up? For community health workers, for example, I heard that the NJIIS is being utilized here.
So NJIIS is up and working. We are everybody who's received a vaccine so far, and I believe the hospitals have vaccinated close to 10,000 people already. All of that, all those doses are being registered in NJIIS, which is something new for us. Adult immunizations have not always gone into that. That is how we're going to track second doses. That's how we're going to track information about reactions. And that's also how we're going to provide the specific information that the federal government wants back. So that has been, in the context of what we're talking about now, CVS and Walgreens and all of our providers are registered into that system and have agreed to provide information within 24 to 48 hours of each vaccination.
Great. Jennifer, I just wanted to see if you had anything you wanted to add or contribute with regards to community health providers and eligibility and timelines for when that might be available.
Yeah, as Dr. Adenaro said, this is going to be an evolving situation. As you all know, the Moderna vaccine was just authorized over this past weekend. And certainly you've probably heard in the news that there's been changing amounts of vaccine available to each state over the next month. So we really are trying to expand the number of sites and the number of doses available to the diverse group of vaccine recipients in the state as soon as possible, but it's going to be a phase. It's not a day, as I know, Mary, you've heard me say before, where we appreciate everyone's patience and just know that if you're not able to be served in December, we certainly will be working to serve you in as early in 2021 as possible.
Thanks, Jennifer. And we do have a pre-submitted question from, or a question from the Q&A from Angela, who says that, due to shortages or just the timeline of this rollout, do we think that the vaccine will be available for home care nurses who aren't attached to the hospital? And Dr. Ednero, I heard you make this remark because it sounds like there's a personal connection here to the home healthcare nurse audience. But can we just provide some clarity that even if you're not affiliated with a hospital, that there will be eligibility?
Correct. If you're a healthcare worker, and that includes if you're working in the home with patients, you are a healthcare worker, even if you're not in a physical facility. So you are in 1A, and they should definitely check with their employers, because several of the largest ones are teaming up with Rite Aid to make these arrangements for the pod. So they probably get more information. But certainly, if you're a nurse who's currently seeing patients, privately or through an agency, you do qualify, and you are eligible in 1A.
Great. I do want to elevate one of the questions and sort of address, we have a network of long-term care of nursing homes that we've connected with through our ECHO model. And we've been talking a lot about the vaccine in the recent weeks. Elise Berry, the CEO of the New Jersey Pharmacists Association, it brings up the question of consent. And this is a question we've heard a number of times here. So Elise's question is, our long-term care pharmacists are told or have been told that there won't be an order necessary for residents to receive a vaccine, but that a written consent must be obtained. Where can we find the written guidance that sort of informs this process? Will that be coming from the pharmacy partners, or where can that information be obtained?
Yeah, so my understanding is that CVS and Walgreens, as part of providing sort of the end-to-end service, will be providing the forms that are necessary before vaccination. And so we've seen some copies of those forms, which does include a consent piece. So as sort of each facility sort of gets in the queue to be vaccinated through CVS and Walgreens, they'll be providing that information to the facility directly.
So it will come from the pharmacy provider?
Correct.
Perfect.
Yes, that's our current understanding, but as with everything, subject to change.
Okay, great. And Jennifer, you sort of talked about this end-to-end. Yeah, I just heard that comment, and that sort of raised a thought in my mind. Will facilities need to be able to store the vaccine, or again, as part of this end-to-end delivery, will that be provided by the federal pharmacy provider?
Jenny, you want to answer that one?
Yeah, my understanding is that storage and handling will be taken care of by CVS and Walgreens. Certainly, if we get any further information on that, we'll let facilities know. But that was actually one of the sort of impetuses for us to partner as part of this partnership, was because CVS and Walgreens have indicated their capacity to appropriately store and handle what is a very complex vaccine in the case of the Pfizer vaccine.
And then, another question we've had a couple of different times now. What about emergency preparedness? We've heard a little bit about the allergic reactions and, things that at least as a pharmacy immunizer, I know we usually need to be prepared with our EpiPens and things like that when providing an immunization service. Will facilities need to have that type of emergency equipment available? Or again, are we thinking that the pharmacy partners will have EpiPens and be prepared to handle anaphylaxis?
I would defer that to the individual institutions contacting CVS and Walgreens. I don't have a good answer for that. I would imagine that they'll probably be prepared, but I would imagine skilled nursing facilities in particular probably should also be prepared for anything that would happen to their residents also. But I would work through the long-term care, the pharmacies.
So I think an important question then for folks who are dialing in, maybe to reach out and confirm with your pharmacy partners as well. Do the approved senior or older adult vaccine sites, in addition to I know long-term care is very broadly defined, will this also include places where older adults congregate, like our senior living communities, for example? Will they be included in that phase 1A?
Jen, you can help. So if we're talking about the long-term care partnership in particular, there's a Part A and a Part B. We obviously, Part A, which has about 650 facilities, is generally, I think most of them are more skilled nursing facility type places. Part B is much broader and has a number of other congregate living settings that are not as high level as a skilled nursing facility. There's about 1,100. We, depending on how quickly we get through Part A, will determine when that group starts. And part of that will be determined by how much vaccine we get. So they really fall into almost sort of a different category in that they may end up being vaccinated in part of 1A, they may be in part of 1B, they may be in part of 1C, depending on the availability of the vaccine. Hope that made sense.
Yeah, and just this goes to it's a phase, not a day. While Part A we know is going to be starting next week, based on vaccine availability, we're trying to start Part B as soon as possible. But again, this, as Dr. Nero said, there is just a supply and demand sort of challenge that every state is sort of wrestling with at the moment. I will also say with the new ACIP guidance that came out over the weekend, those who might be over 75 who don't qualify as part of a long-term care environment could expect to be part of 1B if New Jersey does follow the ACIP's newest recommendation, which would be to include those over 75 in phase 1B. So again, like, we appreciate everyone's patience that this is going to take some time, and we are trying to serve the broadest cross-section of New Jerseyans as possible.
We also had a submitted question from Tony Lynn that asks, there's information potentially in the press now that is saying nursing homes will not start on the 28th of December. Do we have any more information on that? Do we know when to anticipate that vaccination will begin to occur here in New Jersey in our nursing home settings or long-term care facilities?
So we're going to be speaking with CVS and Walgreens over the next day or so to look at their plans. My understanding is that they have been reaching out to skilled nursing facilities and have been making appointments. We don't have insight into who they made appointment with or when. We do know that we expect the program to start next week. We authorized it and we set aside the vaccine. So I haven't heard anything differently, and obviously, if we get anything differently from them, we'll share that.
Great, excellent. Can we talk a little bit about, where can facilities, I guess, access the most current rollout plans or schedules? Just a little bit more of sort of the logistics. Maybe how will they know when their vaccine or when they can expect their vaccine clinics to be scheduled? Is there a resource for that?
They would, that would be specifically, they would deal specifically with CVS and Walgreens for that part of it. Whoever they signed up with is who they should be talking to. Hopefully by now they have a contact person and they've been contacted, at least if they're in Part A. The part that we would obviously be able to provide information on is that sort of the upper level parts, which is the fact in this case that we've authorized this to start on December 28th and that we've made the vaccine available. And obviously, as we figure out when Part B facilities will begin, we'll be able to start, we'll get that information out also. But the specifics for any one site or how many they're going to be doing or in what cadence, I really has to come from the vaccinators.
Sure. How about the guidance? Is this, we've had a number of questions now over our previous sessions. Is this a mandatory or a voluntary sort of vaccine for our healthcare staff? What should staff expect?
So the state of New Jersey and the federal government do not have, the state of New Jersey has no plans to mandate this vaccine at this time. However, I did see some information come out that from the federal government that employers could mandate the vaccine as part of their job. That's not something we're going to take a position on at this point. But that was communicated, I believe, from the federal government over the weekend. Obviously, we are strongly encouraging, particularly everybody who works around vulnerable populations to get vaccinated. And we obviously would strongly encourage the facilities to do whatever is appropriate under the circumstances to encourage people to be vaccinated. Obviously, we're not attempting to make this something where we want people to be held down and have a vaccine given to them. I think that I always think that with proper education, people will get a vaccine. But I also recognize that people have legitimate questions, and that's something that they should deal with their employers on.
Great. We did have another few questions come in with regards to this question of consent. Do we know, will the long-term care facilities, are they eligible to receive consent? Can they consent their residents in advance? Is there a timeliness around the consent and receipt of the vaccine?
Yeah, so because so much of this is dictated by sort of the schedules that CVS and Walgreens are keeping, they will be supplying the forms, and they'll also provide any information around the timelines and what they expect and how far in advance of the vaccine. We don't want to speak broadly in case that it might be different between the two sort of corporations.
And I think there was a good point raised that, for some facilities, I think a question may come up with regards to residents and competency to be able to provide consent also, and needing to reach out to powers of attorney or family members to help with that process.
Absolutely. And that's one of the reasons why facilities should expect CVS and Walgreens reaching out in advance of when they come on site, specifically because there may be residents of our long-term care facilities who need power of attorney and have a third party sort of consent for the individual. We do hope that every facility and every healthcare provider and every resident will be made aware of the emergency use authorization fact sheets. There's a fact sheet for healthcare providers and a fact sheet for both patients and caregivers, and that's specifically so that everyone can be well informed about the vaccine that's made available to them. At this current time, we expect that all of the facilities that are part of the partnership to be given Pfizer vaccine. So we hope that facilities will take a look at those documents for the Pfizer vaccine.
I think that's a great point, Jennifer. We've received a lot of requests for written information. Where can I find, as Dr. Adnero pointed out, information to answer and address either my staff's questions, my residents' questions. Do we know if the emergency use authorization fact sheets, are they available in other languages as well?
Yeah, so that's something that the federal government is working to do the expert translation of those documents. At the current time, they're available in English only, but over the next few weeks, we expect them to be translated into over a dozen additional languages. We are waiting for those, and certainly given the diversity of languages spoken in this state, we've been vocal advocates for that translation to be made available as soon as possible.
Great, I appreciate that. Do we have any guidance, either Dr. Adnero or Jennifer, around this question or issue of staff or residents who may have vaccine hesitancy, who sort of may be in that group, maybe leaning toward receiving the vaccine, but sort of ambivalent, or on the other end, sort of thinking the vaccine is not for them, but again, ambivalent and needing more information? Any strategies or resources that our facilities can maybe utilize?
So I know that the CDC had and FDA had published on their websites information on dealing with vaccine hesitancy, not specific to long-term care. And I believe we may tag onto that on our website also.
I think that would be just great to remind everyone that those resources do exist, even though they may not be specific for the nursing home or long-term care setting. That, I think talking points I've seen or ways to sort of address questions that may arise. Let's see what else we had come in. If an individual has had COVID in the past or has recently recovered, should they still become vaccinated?
Yes. I think the caveat is obviously you should not be symptomatic anymore. But yes, you should be vaccinated.
And then, maybe a little bit about the parameters for the 15-minute observation period, and a little bit about monitoring post-vaccination. We have had some questions come in with regards to, side effects and other concerns that may come up.
So far, at least in the anecdotal reports we've been receiving, the vaccine has been well tolerated. There have been a few reports of an anaphylactic reaction, so there are some precautions that the CDC and FDA have issued for vaccinating individuals who have shown other allergic reactions to intramuscular injections of any type. That is to extend it to 30 minutes. And obviously be prepared to treat anaphylaxis, but there has not been any, so far, any contraindications, relative or absolute, for anybody who should not get the vaccine, unless they have obviously a known reaction to an mRNA vaccine. So obviously anybody who had an anaphylactic reaction the first time would be unlikely to get the second dose.
And we also had a question. I think, Dr. Adnero, in your slides, you alluded to the newsletter that's available. Can you provide the URL or where individuals can go to find that? I think it was called Vax Matters.
I believe it's on that slide. Is the URL? It was a very busy slide, but I believe that slide has the URL also.
Yeah, I'll also just add that our landing page for the department, so if you go to the department website, there's a landing page specific to vaccination, and on that is where we will archive all the editions of Vax Matters. Individuals can also sign up can subscribe to Vax Matters to get it sent to your inbox each week.
Excellent, great. And I think I just found at least a copy of it, so I can push that out in our chat also for participants. So thank you for that information. That's helpful. Let's see what else we have. A little bit more just about the logistics. I think perhaps even to wrap up here, just to be respectful of everyone's time. I think I heard Dr. Adnero talk about different phases, or that facilities might expect at least 3 visits from the federal partners, and understanding that this is certainly an evolving process. Do we expect that vaccine administration will be staggered? Or should a facility expect all staff and residents to receive their immunizations on that first day, and then the follow-up, and then the catch-up period? Or again, is this sort of a fluid process?
I'm sorry, my internet was cutting a little bit out. Could you repeat that question?
Yeah, my question was just with regards to the logistics. I think I heard you speak about that in a broad sense. It sounds like these pharmacy partners should be expected to come to a facility like 3 times.
I believe their contract calls for them to offer a clinic 3 times spaced out over a certain amount of time. Obviously, the second one being either would be at least 21 days, or roughly 21 days after the first, to give the second dose of the vaccine. And then I believe the third time would be a cleanup for anybody they missed, or anybody they vaccinated the first time. On that second visit, they would come back again.
There has been a concern, for example, about new admissions to a facility, or discharges, or residents who may not be present for one of these sessions. Do we expect that the catch-up period will be available to catch those individuals up, or that there may be another mechanism for catching those folks up?
That's a good question. Number one, obviously, we would love to know what the perspective of the long-term care facilities are, and also the vaccine partners once this starts. And as I said, I think earlier on, we recognize that both the people who work in long-term care facilities and the residents are not static, that they do change, and that we are going to have to try to figure out how to create a process for them also. At this time, we're focused on this initial rollout, and then obviously we will need to, work on addressing that longer term issue.
Great. And we did have one final question, Jennifer. Can you speak to where individuals can find these fact sheets with regards to for healthcare providers who may be administering the vaccine, but also for residents and staff who may be receiving the vaccine?
Yeah, so these fact sheets were published by the FDA. We're looking to cross-publish them on our website. Certainly the Moderna ones just came out this weekend, so bear with us while we get them up. But certainly we're trying to sort of reflect the key documents on our own website to make it as easy as possible for folks to gain access. These documents should also be distributed by the points of dispensing, including by CVS and Walgreens, as they're reaching out to facilities. So we're trying to use as many mechanisms as possible to get these in the hands of the people of New Jersey.
And Jennifer, just for clarification, our website, is that covid19.nj.gov, or is there another website that we should be referring to?
Point well taken. Yes, both covid19.nj.gov as well as the Department of Health has a website that's specifically tailored to information for healthcare providers and those who are sort of working with the Department of Health to execute the vaccine program. So both. And apologies for the sort of inside baseball comment.
Appreciate it. I think that provides some clarity and clarification here. And I've shared some of those. We will also make sure, if you're not able to access the chat, again, they're slightly longer URLs, we'll make sure that we'll share these through the Rutgers Project Echo site also. I've received some commentary. A number of our questions in the Q&A are issues that we've addressed along, at some point along this series. So I would refer folks back. We have recordings of our 3 previous sessions. We've addressed some of the issues with what to expect with becoming immunized in this series. We've addressed how to become immunized, who's eligible in this phase 1A rollout and in the other phases, and also the issues surrounding safety and efficacy of the vaccine products. And of course, that's been an evolving area, particularly with the Moderna activity and what's happened and transpired over the weekend. But I would refer other individuals with those questions back to our resource, but also to the resources from the states. I think this is really, really helpful. Jennifer or David, any sort of additional remarks or sort of conclusions to sort of sum up a state of where we're at right now?
So I think the number one, just the fact that you all are here on this call, I think shows that you're motivated and interested and one of our partners in the vaccine process. So thank you for attending. We really do want feedback, both if things are going well and things that can improve, because again, this is a novel thing for everybody. And we are just really excited that vaccines are in New Jersey, and that next week we're going to be getting vaccines into long-term care facilities. These are big moments for us. Not that we have a lot of time to stop and think about them, but these really are big moments for us, and we're very excited that we're now starting our 2nd week of vaccinating people.
Agreed. I'm on deck tomorrow to receive and to administer. So
jealous.
You'll see my selfie all over LinkedIn. So everybody looking to go viral with that.
Excellent.
No pun intended. Maybe pun intended. Well, this, I appreciate Jennifer so much for your input and for all your support in this series and making this come to fruition. Dr. Agnero, thank you so much for your expertise and for sharing your perspectives from the Department of Health, particularly during this busy time. We do want to thank all the participants who've participated, not only for attending today, but throughout our series. As a reminder, we have recorded the webinar and it will be shared. But just on behalf of all of our ECHO partners, the Rutgers Robert Wood Johnson Medical School, the Department of Health, and the Nicholson Foundation, I just want to again extend our appreciation to all of you for all you do each day. Be well and happy holidays. So thank you again, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.